Good morning, everybody. So glad that you guys are with us. Hope you had an awesome Christmas with your family and friends. Hope you had an awesome New Year's Eve. Glad you made it out for the late service, I noticed, but we're really, really glad that you're here. I want to talk to you a little bit about today, about your new year. I want to tell you something about 2023 that I think you really need to know and be aware of. 2023, there are going to be some highs in your life, and in 2023, there are going to be some lows. In the new year, you're going to experience real joy, but there are also going to be some moments in your life that are full of intense pain. That's life. That's not just 2023. That's really every single year of our lives. There's no way around it. And so what we have to do as people is we have to learn how to deal with it. We all know this, but we don't like to think about it. Pain is an unavoidable part of life. There will be days in your life when you're experiencing physical pain. In fact, show of hands, how many of you are in physical pain at this point in your life? Everybody over the age of 40 has their hands up, right? Yes. Yes, well, we have physical pain, but we also have emotional pain. Do not underestimate the power of emotional pain. In fact, psychology today would tell you that emotional pain often affects our lives even more so than physical pain. The reason why is because when you're in physical pain, you go to a doctor and you say, we need to do something about this. But when you're in emotional pain, there are very few people who do anything about it. A lot of people just live with that kind of pain in their life, and it starts to affect them in ways that they don't see and in ways that they don't really understand. Whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, pain really is an unavoidable part of life. And I would tell you, the longer you live, the more intense the pain really becomes. And so, yeah, you're 40, 50, you're joking around, I'm in physical pain. You think you're in physical pain now? But wait till you're 70, 80, or maybe even into your 90s. But the longer you live, the more intense the pain usually becomes. You break up with your high school sweetheart after dating for 6 months, it hurts. Your marriage ends in divorce after 10 or 20 years, it hurts even more. And if you lose the love of your life because they die after 40, 50, or 60 years of marriage, the pain that you feel can be unbearable. I'm telling you, the longer you live, the more intense the pain usually becomes, which means you better learn now how to deal with the pain in your life. A few years ago, I was in the very back of our church, right back here in this back corner, and an elderly lady in our church, she came up to me and she said, Pastor Brandon, I really need to talk to you about something. I said, okay, tell me, what is it? She goes, you know, I lost my husband not long ago. I said, yes, ma'am, I remember. She said, Brandon, we were married together for over 50 years. And I said, I know. I said, how have you been holding up since he passed away? She said, not good. She said, I've been going to the casino every single day because I can't stand to sit in that house by myself. All I do is think about him. I can't stop thinking about how much I miss him. I can't stand being in that house by myself. And so she said, I go to the casino every single day. And she goes, I'm really scared, Brandon, because the truth is my husband always took care of the money. I never even looked at it. And so today I don't know if I've got $1 million in my bank account or if I've got $1 left in my bank account. I'm scared to look. As I listened to her and as I thought about her life, I thought, here is a woman who is feeling pain, and she is doing the best that she knows how to deal with the pain in her life. But when you really look at that situation, what you realize is that she is trying to deal with her pain, not in a way that is helping her. She's trying to deal with the pain in her life in a way that is really hurting her. For her, the casino is a way of escape. I got to get out of this house, even if it is only for a few hours at a time. She got to get out of the house. She just wants to be around some other people. She wants to look at that slot machine. She wants to distract her mind by pushing that button. And that's really what the casino is for a lot of people. It's a place where they can distract their mind from the pain in their life. And I'm telling you, my concern for all of us today is that a lot of us are trying to deal with the pain in our lives in really unhealthy ways, rather than dealing with the pain of our lives in more healthy ways. We all experience pain, but everybody's dealing with pain in very different ways. Some people are trying to escape it. So they're running to the casino. They're hopping on a cruise ship. They're going on another vacation. I remember listening to an interview with Jimmy Buffett once. He said, I'm not a great vocalist. I'm not a great musician. But the secret to my success has been that I have the ability to help people escape for a few minutes at a time. Think about how much money Jimmy Buffett made just helping people escape the realities of life and the pain that life brings. Some people are trying to escape it. Some people are just gritting their teeth and they're trying to push through it. Some people are embracing it and then they become depressed because of it. And some people are trying to numb it or maybe even kill it. So they use painkillers. Most people know that in America today, painkillers are a pretty serious problem. They have been for at least 30 years, if not longer. In the late 90s, early 2000s, prescription drugs were a huge problem in this country. Doctors were pretty generous in passing out the pills. If I can't make you better, then maybe I can at least help you feel a little bit better. And so they were passing out pills. I believe that doctors had really good intentions, but I also believe that they were leading people down a path where they were trying to deal with their pain in a really unhealthy way rather than in a healthy way. These opioids started creeping into society, and we see an epidemic in America that has been growing for the greater part of 30 years or more. 2010, opioids containing heroin started killing people like crazy. Today, the big issue is fentanyl. I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow, but I do know that opioids are not a healthy way for you to be trying to deal with the pain in your life. The Council on Foreign Relations published an article back in May in which they said this: the United States is grappling with one of its worst ever drug crises. More than 1,500 people per week die from opioid-related overdoses, a toll that has spiked across the country amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, millions more Americans suffer opioid addiction. Some people are using opioids to deal with the physical pain. Some people are using opioids to deal with emotional pain. But what you see in America right now is that people are desperate to kill the pain in their life. So let me ask you, what are you using to kill the pain in your life? In a crowd this size, some of you are probably using opioids. I understand why you're using opioids. But I want you to understand that they are going to hurt you far more than they will ever help you. Some of you are not using opioids, you're using something else. So my question is, what is it? When you feel pain in your life, what are you using to make the pain go away? Is it a drink? Is it a website? Is it a shopping spree? Is it overeating? Is it travel? Is it jumping into a new relationship? What are you using to kill the pain in your life? I want you to be honest with yourself. And what I really hope you learn in this series is I hope you learn that there are all kinds of unhealthy ways to deal with your pain. The world has an endless number of options. But there are also some very healthy ways that you can deal with your pain as well. And my hope is that you'll learn what those ways are and that you'll start to put them into practice. Now, I am not going to tell you at any point in this series that if you just follow Jesus, all your pain will go away, because that's not true. In fact, in John chapter 16, a chapter we're going to be in today, next week, probably going to reference it many times over the next 4 or 5 weeks, Jesus looked at his followers, and Jesus said to them in John 16:33, "In this world you will have all kinds of trouble." Following Jesus does not protect you from the pain. But if you follow Jesus, I will tell you that you will discover some very healthy ways that you can start to deal with your pain. And so that's what I want to do. I want to look at Jesus. At this point in the Gospel of John, Jesus is now hours away from dying. He is getting ready to experience both intense physical pain and intense emotional pain. Jesus is going to experience that kind of pain. His followers are getting ready to experience all kinds of pain. And what Jesus is going to do is Jesus is going to show you how he dealt with his own pain. And in the process, we're going to learn a lot about how we need to deal with our own pain. We're going to learn it today, and we're going to learn it together for about the next 4 or 5 weeks. I want to start John chapter 16, verses 16 through 20. First 4 or 5 verses, almost comical. And then you hit verse 20, and Jesus drops a bomb that you really need to be thinking about. This is what we read. John 16, starting in verse 16, Jesus went on to say, "In a little while, you will see me no more. And then after a little while, you will see me." At this, some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me, and because I'm going to the Father'?" They kept asking, what does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he's saying. Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'?" And then he drops a bomb. He says, "Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy." Now, given the pain that some of you are dealing with in your life right now, that is a big, bold claim that I hope for your sake, and I pray to God that Jesus can back it up. That you've got grief, and that grief is somehow going to transform into joy. That's what Jesus said. I'm going to get into it with you in just a minute, but I'm going to start in the shallow end of the pool, okay? So let's just start here. By show of hands, how many of you have ever read the Bible and you did not understand what you were reading? Put your hands up right now. Everybody in the room's hand is going up right now, right? Well, we've all been there, right? These disciples, these followers of Jesus, they've been hanging out with this dude every day for 3 years. And after 3 years, they're listening to what he says, and they do not understand anything that he says, right? Jesus is talking, and he's saying, "Man, I'm going to go away for a little while, and you're not going to see me. And then I'm going to come back after a little while, and you are going to see me. And in the middle of all that, I'm going to go see my Father." And they're thinking, "We don't even know where your Father lives. You never talk much about your Father." Like, what in the world is Jesus talking about? And what you and I know, because we have read the rest of the story, or we could go home and read the rest of the story, is we know that Jesus is talking about the fact that he is getting ready to die. And it's not just going to be that Jesus is going to die and he's going to peacefully pass away with a heavy dose of morphine kicking in his system. Jesus is getting ready to die, and it is going to be incredibly painful. They're going to start, and they are going to flog Jesus, or what that really means is they are going to whip Jesus with an ancient torture device called a cat of nine tails. If you don't know what this is, you can pull out your phone. I promise you won't offend me, and you can Google cat of nine tails right now, and what you'll find is an image of a whip that had 9 leather straps that came off the end that they would use to whip people's bare backs as a source of punishment. Now, oftentimes what they would do to make it even more painful is they would take sharp rocks and bone fragments and they would tie them off on each end of the leather strips for this cat of nine tails, so that when they would whip his back, that bone fragment and that rock would grab a hold of his flesh and rip chunks off with every whip they delivered. Jesus would be flogged 39 times. Not 40, because they actually believed that 40 times would probably kill a man. And they didn't want to kill a man. The Romans just wanted to torture the man. They wanted to bring as much pain to a person as humanly possible. After being flogged 39 times, Jesus would be crucified. Crucifixion was a very painful way for a person to die. In fact, our word excruciating comes from the word crucifixion or crucify. And so crucifixion wasn't just a means of killing someone. A crucifixion was designed to be a deterrent to everyone so that they would see this is what the Romans are going to do to people who rebel against the empire or who say something bad about Caesar. That they would take these people up onto a high hill and they would crucify them, because crucifixion was designed to keep someone alive as long as possible so that as many people as possible would see what happens to people who cause trouble. This is what Jesus is getting ready to live through in the next 12 to 15 hours of his life. He's going to live through it. His disciples and followers and friends are all going to watch it. And Jesus knows it's coming. And so Jesus says, I better use this moment right here, right now, to prepare all of us for the pain that we're about to live through. And so Jesus says to his disciples, he says, you're going to be weeping and mourning while at the exact same time, at the exact same circumstances, the world is going to be rejoicing. And so Jesus is getting ready to get a crown of thorns crushed down on his skull. He's getting ready to be flogged and mocked and beaten and crucified and killed. And his followers and friends, his own mother, they're going to be watching it all, and they're going to be weeping and mourning. And the world is going to be rejoicing. The chief priest is going to be rejoicing, and the religious leaders are going to be rejoicing. Satan is going to be rejoicing. The Roman guards are going to be rejoicing. And at the end of verse 20, Jesus said something really important about the pain they were all getting ready to go through. Let me tell you, it's a perspective on pain that you better have, because it's a perspective on pain that will bring you real hope. Jesus said to his followers, you will grieve, but your grief is going to transform, or it's going to turn to joy. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, Jesus is saying right now, there are going to be things that you go through in this life, And it is going to cause you all kinds of grief right now, but it is going to turn into joy later. And the opposite side of that same coin is also true. There are other things that are going on in this world right now that are causing people joy, but somewhere down the road, that joy that you feel now is going to turn into grief a little later. There were people last night who were caught up in some stuff that they thought's bringing joy. They're waking up this morning. That joy has been turned into real grief. And so I want you to think about the crucifixion of Jesus with me for just a minute. Those who are not followers of Jesus, they're watching all of this unfold. Here Jesus is, he's arrested, he's convicted on bogus charges, being tortured. It's awful. And there they are, and they are celebrating the fact that Jesus is gone. The chief priests and religious leaders are like, great, we don't have to debate him anymore and then be humiliated in front of the crowds. Jesus isn't going to question our authority or be there to undermine our authority. We're going to get all of his followers and they're going to become our followers. Like we're rejoicing then. But you better believe that they are grieving now. And the reason that they're grieving now is because right now on the other side of eternity, they can see very clearly who Jesus is, and they can see very clearly what they did. And all that joy that they felt in the moment, it has been turned into immense grief in the here and the now. And so it makes me wonder, follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus today, wherever you are there things that bring you joy now, but are going to bring you all kinds of grief later? This is life. We feel pain, we don't like the pain, and so we want something that will just make us feel better. And so we run to the world thinking it's going to produce joy, when in reality all it does is produce all kinds of grief. Jesus says, man, if you're on that side of the coin, I'm going to flip the script on you one day. And all that stuff that you thought was going to bring you joy, it's not. It's going to bring you real grief. But Jesus is going to flip the script on his own followers too, in a much more positive way. These friends and followers of Jesus, they were grieving then, but you better believe that they are full of joy now. In the moment, they had to watch Jesus arrested. They had to watch Jesus being flogged and tortured. They had to watch him being mocked and crucified and eventually killed. And because they loved Jesus, they were weeping and they were grieving for Jesus. The pain they felt was real, and they felt that pain for days on end. And then a miracle happened. It was called the resurrection. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, he came out of a grave and he came back to life. And when that happened, all of the grief and the pain that his disciples felt, it immediately started being transformed into joy, because this is what God does. God takes really bad things, and out of bad things, he brings all kinds of good things. He takes things in your life that are bringing you all kinds of pain, and in some miraculous way, he transforms it into real joy. Now, I know that for most of you, that's a claim that sounds a little too churchy, that sounds hollow to you, because you can't even fathom a miracle of God like that. But what I promise you is that when you get to the other side of eternity and you see the reality of resurrection power, when you get to the other side of eternity and you see with your own eyes what the healing hand of God has done to those you loved and lost, when you get to the other side, And you can look at and see how God has fulfilled and kept every single promise that He ever made. When you get to the other side and you see how short-lived your suffering was in the grand scheme of eternity, in that moment you are going to see all of that grief being transformed into authentic, overwhelming, lasting, deep, satisfying joy. And Jesus knew this. Jesus knew that because their perspective changed, the way they felt about it changed. When His disciples saw the reality of a resurrected Jesus, they were no longer thinking about the flogging. They weren't thinking about the crucifixion, because now they are enamored not with what happened, but with what God is currently doing. Not with the suffering that we used to experience, but the joy that we are now experiencing. And so think about those disciples for just one more second. When they saw the resurrected Jesus, they realized that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, He just conquered death. And what they would later learn is that not only did Jesus conquer death, but that means that every person who is a follower of Jesus will also conquer death. That these guys are starting to realize that Jesus really is going to establish a kingdom. But it's not some earthly kingdom. Even better, it is an eternal kingdom. And so these guys who were followers of Jesus, they're realizing, wait a minute, I'm not just going to rule and reign with Jesus for a little while. I am going to get to rule and reign with Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the King of Kings, forever. And that's why these guys are listening to Jesus going, wait a minute, He told us that the grief we felt would somehow, some way be transformed into joy. And I need you to know that's what He told them. And it was true for their life, but I need you to know and I need you to believe that it's also true in your own life. There are things that you are grieving right now, and those things are going to miraculously turn into joy later. When you get to the other side, when you see the healing hand of God, when you see the reality of resurrection power, when you see suffering in light of the grand scheme of eternity, when you see that God is not just a promise maker, but He's a promise keeper, you are going to be overwhelmed with feelings of joy. I know it's hard for you to see it. And I know that for some of you, your pain is so deep and so real right now, it's hard for you to believe it. In fact, some of you are probably sitting there and you're a little bit angry that I would have the audacity to stand on this stage and tell you that the worst thing that ever happened in your life, God is somehow going to bring joy out of that. And yet that's what I'm telling you. Because God does not just take the worst thing that ever happened in your life. God took the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of the world, the death of His own Son. And out of that, He has brought immense joy to billions upon billions of people. Because through the sacrifice of Jesus, billions upon billions of people have found forgiveness for their sins. Through the sacrifice of Jesus, billions of people have had their guilt and their shame taken away. But because of the sacrifice of Jesus, billions of people throughout the history of the world have been saved from a real place called hell where others will spend eternity. I'm telling you, the worst thing that has ever happened in this world has produced the greatest amount of joy that people have ever known. It is unbelievable what our God can do with painful situations. Now, I know that for some of you, it's still hard for you to believe in a miracle like that. In fact, I also know that Jesus knows that it's hard for you to believe in a miracle like that. And so what Jesus does next is He uses an analogy that will help people understand how something like this could really happen with their pain. And man, I hope it helps you understand. Listen to what Jesus said in the next two verses, John 16, verses 21 and 22. He said, a woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So it is with you. Now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. You know what Jesus is saying? He's saying there are going to be some things that you live through in this life that are going to be unbearable. In fact, what's the word that Jesus uses? He uses the word anguish, because that's what life is going to feel like some days. But all that pain and anguish that you feel now, it is going to be immediately transformed into real joy later. And so think about that woman who is lying on that table and she's in the process of giving birth to her child. In 1 second, she is experiencing incredible pain and agony. And in the very next second, when that doctor takes that baby and lays that baby on her chest, all she can think about and all she can feel is incredible, pure, overwhelming senses of joy. And that's what it's going to be like for you. If you're a follower of Jesus, it's going to be pain and agony 1 second, and it's going to be pure, unadulterated joy in the next second. I love this example because it teaches us something about our willingness to endure pain. Now, you know this. People will endure a lot of pain as long as they know there is a purpose or a payoff in the end. This is why some of you run marathons. It's painful, but there's a purpose or a payoff in the end, and it brings you joy. That's why some of you do CrossFit. This is why some of you started your diet this morning. This is why some of you endured the pain of detox. This is why some of you work long hours. And yes, this is why some women choose to have more than one child. People will endure a lot of pain as long as they know there's a payoff or there's a purpose in the end. Childbirth is one of the most painful things that a person can go through. And yet for many women, a couple of years after she has her first child, she starts talking about wanting to try to have another child. And her husband goes, I'm all for trying. We can start right now, baby. It's a different kind of joy, fellas, but we can talk about it someday. But right now we're talking about her pain, okay? And it's all your fault. You better know that, right? But she wants another child. Why in the world does she want to go through that again? Was the pain not all that bad? Has she forgotten about the pain? No, she's never going to forget about it. And yes, it really was that bad. But she is willing to endure the pain again because of what the pain produced for her. Jesus is teaching that God can bring beautiful things and new life out of really painful situations. In the moment, the pain is real and it's intense. But Jesus is saying when it's over, you're going to look back and you're going to see that it was all worth it. So Jesus wants his disciples to embrace a perspective that will help them in their pain. Jesus is telling his disciples, guys, it's going to be worth it. But in order for them to get through the pain, they have to stop focusing on what they feel now, and they've got to start focusing on another time and another place. It's why Jesus said in verse 23 and again in verse 26, he said he wanted to get his disciples thinking about what it would be like in that day. I don't want you thinking about today, because today is going to be the darkest, most painful, difficult day of our lives. And so let's get our minds off of this day and let's start thinking about what it will be like in that day. It's why Jesus said in verse 28, I came from the Father and I entered into the world, but now I am leaving this pain-filled world and I'm going back to the Father. Jesus was not thinking about what is happening now. And Jesus did not want his disciples just thinking about what's happening here, because there's a whole lot more to this than just the here and the now. And so Jesus said, guys, we got to start thinking about the then and the there. That when you feel that pain, you've got to shift your focus. Jesus is so close to the end that Jesus can now see the light at the end of the tunnel. He could see what was coming, and it helped him get through the pain. But let me tell you something. You don't just need perspective in dealing with pain. You need a promise that you can hold on to as you're dealing with the reality of pain. That's why Jesus said, your pain will be transformed into joy. That's a promise. That's why Jesus said, no one will ever take away your joy. That's a promise. When you're dealing with pain, you need a promise, right? A couple weeks ago, I went to get my flu shot. Girl walked in. She said, this is only going to hurt for a second. I promise. I looked at her and said, you better keep that promise, right? And she did. She kept her promise. Like it was over in a flash. And that's what Jesus is trying to get them to understand. That the pain that you're feeling is a flash in the pan in the grand scheme of eternity. And so maintain that perspective. And in the meantime, hold on to the promise that the grief is going to turn into joy and that no one will then be ever able to take away your joy. You got to hold on to the promises like that. That's why the author of Hebrews said it like this in chapter 10, verse 23. He said, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. The promises of God will help you get through the pain in your life. As followers of Jesus, there are going to be some things that you go through. Jesus knows the pain. But unlike you and me, Jesus also knows what's on the other side. And so to all his followers and friends, he said to them, I'm going to get you through it, and you better believe that it will be worth it. But I need you to know that only applies to people who are followers of Jesus. If you're not a follower of Jesus, I don't have a lot of hope to offer you. Because followers of Jesus, they don't have promises to hold on to. They don't have that eternal perspective that's helpful. In fact, if you're not a follower of Jesus, this right here is as good as it's ever going to get for you. And honestly, it's not that good, given all the pain that we deal with in our lives. It's why there's an opioid epidemic in our world. It's why people are pushing for the legalization of marijuana, because it's the only thing they have that will ease the pain in their life. It doesn't have to be that way. Jesus has an open invitation on the table for you. No, he's not going to take away all your pain. But he is going to help you learn to deal with your pain in far healthier ways. Now, there's a lot more about pain that I need to say, but I'm out of time. And so I need you to come back, and I need you to come back every single week of this series as we talk about the problem of pain and as we learn from Jesus, all the other ways that we can deal with our pain in far healthier ways. In the meantime, if you have questions about pain in your life and what's going on, you can email me at questions@mosaicgc.com. I'll either address those questions in this series on a podcast called The Loop that we do, or I'll email you back directly. But we want to help you overcome the pain in your life in a far healthier way. Will you pray with me? If you're not a follower of Jesus today, I want to give you the opportunity to become one. You walked in here today, you're dealing with real pain, and you can see that you've been dealing with that pain in some really unhealthy ways, ways that are not helping you, but ways that are actually hurting you. Today, I want to ask you to become a follower of Jesus right where you sit. Confess to Jesus that you need Him to forgive your sins. Confess to Jesus that you want Him to lead your life. That you want Him to show you how to deal with pain in healthier ways rather than all of these unhealthy ways that you've been trying to cope and medicate with what you're dealing with. Simple prayer like that starts a relationship with Jesus. If that's something that you need today, I want you to let me know. I want you to use the Connect card in the seat pocket in front of you. I want you to go home. I want you to hop on our website or our app, and I want you to use the Connect tab, and I want you to let me know about the pain that you're feeling and about your need for Jesus. I want to help you grow in that relationship. God, for all of us, we're dealing with pain, followers of Jesus or not. And God, I hate to see how people are looking for an escape that's actually becoming their bondage. And so, God, my prayer is that people in this series might learn far healthier ways to deal with the reality of pain. God, may you teach us from the life and the words of Jesus. And may it free us in a way that only you could free us. I pray it all in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.